Hi, everybody. I'm Tamara Zoner.
And I'm John Davis.
Welcome to Spirit Cafe.
Come in, sit down, and
grab a cup of love.
A Spirituality Without the Guilt podcast. Angels, ghosts, and demons. Oh my. Well, we're not going to talk about demons today, but we are going to talk about angels and ghosts. Demons are a whole different topic, I think. But angels and ghosts, spirituality, and how do they tie together, and what kind of experiences that I have had and Tamara has had we have heard from other people about angels and ghosts and how they tie into our belief system. And we're of course going to talk to this with our lovely co-host, the Miss Tamara Zoner. How are you, Tamara?
I'm all right, John, but honestly a little disappointed. I thought you were going to introduce me as an angel.
Oh yeah.
Oh wait, are you saving that intro for the demon topic?
Yeah, absolutely.
The horns.
Oh my. That's
Just
great.
kidding.
Oh no, I wasn't. You were a demon. That was good. That was great. So we're talking about angels and ghosts and things of that nature. And to me, I much like you, I know that we both have a belief that the concepts of what is true spiritually is greater than any of us can comprehend, really.
Certainly.
And I know I've said in earlier programs that when I was doing some of my meditation practices and stuff, I did get into a situation where someone looked at me on the other side and said, "You're not supposed to be here yet."
Yes, that's right.
And so I'm a firm believer that there is a consciousness outside of this reality. And I'm also, because of my belief in reincarnation, I believe that we ourselves, our consciousness goes past this reality as well. Mm-hmm. Now, I kind of like to share a couple short stories. And I think they're a great jumping off point for what I'm talking about. So the first one I'm going to talk about is a ghost. It's a ghost story, and It's a simple ghost story. I live in this beautiful 3,200 square foot house on 2 acres of land with woods and a creek behind the house, and just beautiful, beautiful place. When I moved into this house, it was just me and my son. And I moved into this house, and we were having a great time, loving this house. It was awesome, really incredible. And then one day my son comes running downstairs, and he's very upset. And I said, what's the matter, Kyle? And he says, "I just saw a woman walk across from that room to that room over the staircase and disappear."
Oh.
And I was like, okay, that's pretty interesting, right? And I said, it's okay. And the next day we have a little half bathroom down here right off the kitchen. And it's one of those rooms that's completely enclosed. There's no window inside of it. Okay. And the way the electric is done in this house is really weird. The light for that bathroom is in a different room. So it's just kind of strange, So sometimes I'll just go in there and close the door and go to the bathroom in the dark because it's just easier. Mm-hmm. So I went in there and I closed that door, and I was in the complete pitch dark because I was inside with no windows. And in that room, there was a flash of light. In that completely enclosed room with no other light source, there was a flash of light. And so I talked to a friend of mine who was a medium.
Okay.
Because I have those kind of people as friends.
Quite a few of those, don't you?
Right. And her name was Alora. And I said, "Alora, this is what happened." She said, "Well, let me tap in and see what's going on." Right. And she says, "Well, John, there's a woman who was the owner of that house that you're in, who is there still living in," and this is what I found really interesting. She says she's living in the older part. Now, she didn't know at the time that this house was originally a 900 square foot Cape Cod. And when I got this house, they had increased the size up to 3,200 square feet. Okay. Right. So, and where my son saw her was in the older part of the house.
Oh.
Right. So this was pretty interesting to me. Right. She says, "Would you like me to talk to her and ask her to go?" I said, "Well, if it's good for her." If that, she can live with
Very
this, or
kind of
she
you.
can, yeah, she can live with this, or she can, just as long as she didn't freak. She didn't, she only scared Kynan because of the fact that he saw her.
Hmm.
Right? She never did do anything, maleficent or maleficent. No, that's the right word. No,
No,
that's the
Maleficent
movie.
is from Sleeping Beauty.
That's the movie. Yeah, it's whatever it
Malevolent.
is. Malevolent. Thank you. I was like, God, I kept thinking of Angelina Jolie. Right. Um, and so she never did anything malevolent. She never did anything that was harmful. And so I wasn't, she it's her house, right?
Right. She was there
so,
first, I guess.
so she did that night. She did a session. We never saw her again. Never saw flashes of light or anything again. So then later on that year, I'm outside and I hadn't really met my neighbors yet.
Okay.
And I go over and I'm talking to my neighbors. He says, yeah, he says, glad to see somebody nice moved into that house. I go, yeah, well, thank you very much. It's really nice to be here. He says, yeah, my aunt owned that house. And he said she loved that house. It was a small little Cape Cod. It was one of the first ones on this road. He started describing this woman that was staying in the older part of the house.
Wow.
And literally, it was the neighbor's relative was still living here.
Oh my gosh, that's cool.
So that's my first one. So I'll delve into my other bigger ones in a while. But with that one, I want to talk about the idea of our consciousness being attached to something enough that a part of us stays with it. So have you ever heard of psychometry?
No. Tell me more.
The psychometry, you go to a psychic and you bring them, Uncle Joe's
I see where you're going with this. Okay.
And they hold Uncle Joe's pocket knife and they tap into Uncle Joe, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So my question is, can someone be so completely connected to them consciously that a part of themselves is left behind to be seen as an apparition or a ghost?
Oh, well, I have no idea, John, but it sounds like an intriguing theory. And it would make some sense if it was an important enough object. Or here's my theory. Their consciousness is still around. It's because they haven't moved on. And because they're attached to something, not the object, but someone or some unfinished business. And the way that they can communicate is through that object.
Right. I remember when my mother was passing away, she was literally holding on to life because of the fact that she wanted to leave something for her children. And so she was literally, she was worried about my younger brother because he was a crazy wild kid. And so she had all these things. And I had a long talk with her. So Mom, I said, you don't have to worry about any of that because, we'll take care of my brother. We'll do the things that we need to do. The only thing we care about really is you living a good life and having a good experience. Right. And when she passed away, it was peaceful. It was easy. Right. But nobody was there. Right. They found her lying next to her bed. And I say peaceful and easy. And because of what I'm about to tell you.
Okay.
So my sister, Susan, was very distraught about the fact that Mom was alone. And she kept focusing on the fact that Mom was in pain. Right. And she had this thought of Mom was in pain. And she went to a medium in a town near where she lived. My sister is not a believer in that kind of thing.
Okay.
Her background is in mathematics, very science-based. Right. So she goes there and the woman picks her out of the crowd. And she starts telling her all these things that only Mom could tell her, right? So then my sister, being the science-minded person, leaves there and she's like debating it.
Okay.
Right? So she takes my other sister back. And the lady does it to my other sister.
Oh.
And starts saying all these things, right? So then my sister still keeps doubting it. She asked me to go.
Okay.
I go in and I'm standing there, and my sister, just to tell you how much she was testing this, my sister sat somewhere else in the room
That's what I would do too.
Right? Because
See
she's
if
like, I
it's
don't
real.
want, yeah, I don't want her to think that I'm with that guy, right?
Right.
So I sat down, and the first thing the lady says, she says, okay, there's somebody here on the stage with me, and she's playing the piano. And she plays the piano like at church, right? Now, my mother played the piano all the time, and my mother was the church organist, right?
Right.
And so I'm okay. She said, and she said that there's someone here who is like a vaudeville performer or something like that. And I was like listening. I was listening. Finally, it was like I raised my hand. She said, "Oh, good, somebody's here." And I stood up. She says, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I did Renaissance festivals all over the country. It's a vaudeville. It's the new vaudeville, really, is what we called it at Renaissance festivals."
Oh,
And she says, you did like spiritual counseling or something, didn't you? And I said, yeah. She says, there's one thing you need to know. You need to know that you are better than you think you are. She says, you beat yourself up too much, which is true. You know, I beat myself up a little too much, right? She says, you don't know all the good you've done with the work that you've done. And, you know, and how proud we are of you, right? Now, those are words that my mother would never say in life, right? And those are words that I really needed to hear from my mother. And it was great. It was really, then she says, you need to know. And she said, your family needs to know. And this is very specific. Your family needs to know that when she died, it was like she was here and then she was there. There was no pain and no suffering. And she went right when she was supposed to. My sister burst into tears. That was her biggest thing, was that mom was alone and suffering, right? And so that whole thing happened, right? So then, you know, the experience I had with my father, right? So this was a really amazing conversation. She actually called, she said, you have a child whose name starts with K, and my son's name is Kynan, right? So she was really on it. So they went back again after I wasn't there, because I was only down there visiting, right? And they went back again, and mom came through again.
Okay. Oh my gosh, your mom is persistent. I love her.
And this time dad came through.
Oh, wow.
And dad said to them, I want you to tell your brother I'm sorry. She said that I treated him very poorly in life, and I didn't know any better, and I know better now. Right? So putting it back to our original conversation. Now we're talking about mediumship and ghosts, right? To me, that consciousness on the other side is talking to us through this woman. So the movie Ghost is all about a medium, right? With Goldberg, right? So to me, it literally is just a manifestation of voice through a person, right? And she's experiencing the ghost when she's doing it. So that to me is interesting. Now, when I was in Norway, here's the one that I could to go to the next level. What I've talked about so far is the idea that ghosts are speaking through somebody else through you, to you. When I was in Norway, I snapped a picture of a church door, and a face showed up in the picture, and the face was in mist. Now, to me, it was so crazy, because I took the picture with a digital camera. I got back to my room. I was going through the pictures. I saw it, and I ran back out of the hotel room and ran back over to the church to take more pictures to see what I could find. Nothing else ever happened. It was only that one shot. So the more I looked at that picture, the more I was like, wow, that really looks like Jesus. And I kept saying, that looks like Jesus. And then I started thinking, wow, that the coloring of that really looks like the Shroud of Turin. Like that. And so what I did was, in Photoshop, I took a picture of the Shroud of Turin, cut the face in half, and put it on the picture, because my image only had half the face in the smoke.
Okay.
And I set the other half of the image on top of that image on the other side, and it completed the face. And I mean, and when I say completed the face, it completed the mustache lines. It created,
that is crazy.
completed the eyebrows, the hairline. The only difference was the guy on the left of the screen, his eyes were open and he was looking straight forward. And the guy on the right side of the screen for the Shroud of Turin, his eye was swollen shut. right? So it was really interesting. So now we've gone from don't say ghosts speaking through someone to an actual apparition in front of me. So when I look at ghosts in general, I don't look at them as the scary ghost or even the Casper the Friendly Ghost. I look at them as a consciousness that has a better grasp of our reality. If that makes any sense.
It does make sense. It's very interesting. And I have a question. So,
yeah.
Excuse me, in my thinking about ghosts, consciousness, angels, spirits, I tend to separate out. So I wouldn't think of your mom coming through as a ghost.
Mm-hmm.
I would think of her as speaking through a medium from the spirit realm to bring a message into the earthly realm. Whereas now your friend at your house, she was a ghost, right? Her spirit was still wandering on this plane, but your mom had to communicate through someone on this plane because she wasn't here anymore. Does that make sense? Does that distinction make sense?
Yeah.
So when I think of a ghost, I think of it as an entity that hasn't released their earthly experience yet. So that's why their consciousness is grounded here still, because they haven't walked toward the light and gone to the other side. They're still here, just not in the physical. Whereas an angel or a spirit can communicate from the other side when we need them. Right.
The angels to me are fascinating because, as you know, when I was a kid, I saw things all the time, and I had my imaginary friends. And I'll tell you an interesting story. When I first started doing Renaissance festivals and I first went on the road, I was having a very hard time with my father at that time. It was, I had to leave, and I had to leave like right away. And I had just got a little Airstream travel trailer, and I had a little tiny truck, and it was not a truck that was designed to haul an Airstream travel trailer. It was too small, right? But I had to leave, and it was about 3 weeks before the first festival I was going to open. So I couldn't go to their site. I had to leave. And I loaded that truck and I attached onto it with the Airstream, and I drove from Delaware to Georgia. And I killed that truck. I killed that truck driving there. But when I got down there, it was funny because I was in this place of, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? And I turn on the TV, and the sportscaster's talking to the weather guy about how they both just named their son Griffin. Right? Okay, it's interesting. Then I started seeing the word Griffin everywhere. And then I started seeing pictures of griffins everywhere. And it got really prevalent. I started seeing these griffins. So I'm getting ready to leave for Georgia. Where am I going to go? So I open up a map. The closest place I can go is Griffin, Georgia. Right? It's a state park, right? So I haul myself to Griffin, Georgia. I pull into there. It's state park. You can stay for 2 weeks.
Okay.
I had 2 weeks, right? So I went there. I go to the office. They say, just go out to the campsite, pull around, find a spot. Nobody's even out there right now because it's a little too cold, But I had the Airstream with the heat and the whole bit. So I drove out there and I found this beautiful spot. I had my dog with me. I had a 110-pound Rottweiler named Odin, who was the biggest lap dog in the world. And I found this spot, and I'm backing into this spot, and this guy drives up in a truck that looks very much like a truck my father used to have. It was a 1951 Chevy, right? And he steps out of the truck. That's why I say van. He steps out of the truck. He's got a ponytail. He's got shorts and flip-flops. It's cold. It's cold outside.
Okay.
He looks like somebody that I would just know from Rehoboth. I would say he was probably in his 30s. He had a nice little dog with him who got along with my dog great.
Okay.
And he says, hold on, don't back in there yet. And I said, okay. He walks over and he says, I wanted to let you know the power is out on this site. You're going to need to move to the one over there because that one has power and this one doesn't. I said, oh, thank you so much for that. Helps me because I didn't want to get all unhooked and leveled and everything.
Mhm.
So I pulled out and pulled over to the other site. Before I even unhooked, I took a lamp and plugged it in to make sure the electricity worked.
Mhm.
And then I got all set up and everything was great. That night, a storm came through. Just missed the campsite. Tornado passed within 5 miles of the site.
Oh my
I
goodness.
came out the next morning. Where I would have been sleeping was a tree.
Whew.
Right. So the interesting thing was after the guy told me he left, I never saw him again. I didn't know who this person. So I look at him as someone who showed up at a time to let me avoid that fate.
Mhm. That definitely
Right.
sounds like an angel.
To me, that would be an angel,
Yes,
right?
definitely.
Now, I've also had the moments where I've been very conscious that I was talking to an angel, where
Okay.
I went to a real estate seminar. I forget whether it was Florida or Connecticut. I went to a couple of them. And I was in there and I kept looking at this guy and he kept looking at me. He was an older gentleman, had a white handlebar mustache, which was kind of striking. And he keep looking at each other and the break comes and the two of us go out to the lobby. And he says, so what have you learned? This is what he says, right? And I'm like, well, about real estate? He says, no. What have you learned?
Hmm.
And we got into a deep conversation about where I was on my spiritual path.
Wow.
And the more I told him, his name was Albie. That's all I know. Albie. And he gave me insights to spirituality that I had never experienced and never even thought about. It took me down new paths and new directions that, I wouldn't be where I am in my belief system right now without that conversation. We both missed the afternoon session of the real estate course, and he wasn't at the second day. Right. And so I never saw him again. And to me, it was like that person came into my life once again to give me the information I needed at that time. I've had those kind of experiences a lot in my life. And
Amazing.
so, sometimes you have the experience where you just realize that something else is happening.
Mhm.
And so do angels have wings, or do angels show up in the form we need them to show up in?
Oh, I think so. I definitely do. And it's a personal belief, I believe, right? But I know, for instance, my grandmother, favorite human being of my life. I absolutely love and adore her. And she passed away 8 years ago at 101 years old. And I lived in England at the time, and she was here in Michigan. I feel her presence more now than ever when she was alive, because I was jumping around different ponds.
Right.
And she's just always here. She's always here on my fingers. I always feel her presence very, very closely. Angels.
Mm-hmm. So
Fascinating.
let me tell you another interesting story, and I'm going to tie it in with everything else I've said already.
Okay.
Okay. My aunt is an amazing individual. She was one of the first Peace Corps volunteers, and she was in Peru.
Okay.
She got married. She had 3 kids. She ended up divorcing and bringing her kids back to the States. Her son Carlos was a very interesting individual in the fact that he was one of those guys he really thought from the scientific level. He was like, he was the kid who carried a dissecting kit in his pocket, right? He was like one of those kids, right? Well, when he got older in life, his mental state was not really right, and he ended up committing suicide. Mm-hmm. And we were staying in my mother's house, and I had just come back for the summer or something. I forget what it was. And I was staying in the room where my grandmother had died. And I've never had a connection with my grandmother, so, and I never have seen any apparitions of my grandmother at all. But I'm
Okay.
in that room, much like that restroom I told you about in this house. That
Mm-hmm.
room was inside the house, and there was, when the lights were out, it was dark, pitch dark. And I was in that room, and I told you in another episode that I've seen auras, I've seen the energies
Mm-hmm.
of things. And in that room, there was an aura. There was an aura that was the shape of a person in that room.
Okay.
And I just consciously knew that it was Carlos. I knew that it was him. And I suddenly heard this thought. And that's the way I'm going to say it again. I heard a thought. I didn't hear a voice. I heard a thought in my head. And it was, you need to tell my mother I'm in a better place.
Wow.
Right. So about a week and a half goes by, and I'm in the house there. It's a Sunday morning. My father is golfing. My brother's asleep upstairs. My mom, of course, is at church. Right. And the only person other than my brother who's asleep upstairs in the house was my aunt,
Okay.
who was in the kitchen. So I walked out and I sat down next to her, and I'm like, okay, how do you broach this subject? Right. So, okay. So I said, do you believe in auras? I just started talking about auras. And she started telling me some pretty big esoteric stories she had when she was in Peru
Okay,
with
cool.
some really interesting people. I said, well, I'm glad you said that, because I saw an aura in the room the other night, and it was Carlos. And her face went white, and she asked me a question. She said, is he in a better place?
Wow.
I said, those are the exact words he used and told me to tell you, that he's in a better place than he was when he was here.
Wow.
And so now let's back up. So in that situation, I was the medium,
Yes.
right? The
I have
apparition was
chills.
the ghost. The apparition was the ghost, right?
Yes.
The aura I saw was the ghost.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the angel, because I carried the message
Yes.
to, so it is that how it works, or is that how it can work? Or what's your thought on that?
Ha. Well, how are we to know until we're on that other side?
Isn't that right?
I don't know. It's all guesswork. And
Right,
I'm
right.
happy to be guessing, because
Right. Yeah. Well,
I'm not ready to be on the other side.
that's what this whole podcast is about, is
Yeah.
exploring things like that.
Yes.
Because to me, I look at that from the perspective, and I laid this out very specifically. You know, I talked about mediumship first, then I talked about ghosts, and I talked about
Yes.
angels, right?
Yes.
And in that story, I look at it as I was a medium, and I saw a ghost,
Right.
and I delivered the message.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, did that guy in the truck, and Albie at that, was he just a person who was bringing information through from the other side, or was he truly an angel? Were they
Right.
truly angels?
Yeah.
Or are we in our, I know, because I know you, that you have said the right thing at the right time for someone to have a change in their life. I know that.
And I think that's like the angels whispering in our ears,
Right.
you know, and like you say, you heard a thought. Sometimes when I'm speaking to someone, words just come out, and I never thought them first. They came out, and like you said, it was the right thing. It was exactly what someone needed to hear. And
so
I think that's like little angels on my shoulders.
Right. And so that was your perspective. So now from the person who you told it to, right?
Yes.
Do they think you're the angel that brought the message?
Yes, the earth angel. Yes.
Right, the earth angel. So to me, it's a very interesting concept in the fact that it's a consciousness. And we talked about reincarnation, about the idea of the wheel, and the outer wheel being the collective consciousness of all. Right. And so I often wonder whether our ghosts and our mediums and are all just tapping into what Edgar Cayce would have called the Akashic records. You know, the space where our consciousness of all is collected into a pool. Right.
Yes.
And so the angels we see in life might be, and now don't get me wrong, I've seen, like when I saw Nick Bunick. He was there was a book written about him called The Messengers, and
Mhm.
he remembered being the Apostle Paul.
Okay.
And when I went to see him speak, and I got to know Nick, we got to talk, but the first time I saw him speak, I saw what I honest to God thought was an angel with wings standing behind him.
Wow.
And so then I assessed that from the idea of, is that my Catholic upbringing putting wings on this energy, or is it
Mhm.
the image that I'm placing around the divine
Yeah.
from my own dogmatic beliefs?
Mhm.
So I don't
That's
know.
an
To
interesting
me,
question.
it's a, and you know what? We don't, in this podcast, we don't have to give answers. We just have
Right.
to
We don't
give,
have them all. We're just
right.
curious.
Yeah. It's about making people ponder
Yes.
and
Yeah.
come up to their own belief. Because once again, what you and I say, it's spirituality is a personal journey,
Mhm.
not a something to be followed, but something to be found.
Yes.
And so to me, I look at it from the principles of, I don't know enough and I'm not vain enough to say it's what it is.
Mhm.
But in my personal experience, I've had some pretty incredible experiences
You have had some amazing experiences.
and
And
have
I think
shown me
part
some
of
things.
what we're here for in this podcast is to inspire people to have these kinds of conversations with their friends, with their loved ones, because time is of the essence.
Time is
We
of the
we
essence.
only know of this particular life we're living, so use it wisely. Speak deeply with the people that you love so that you can connect in this realm and the rest. And with time on our minds, it's time for us to go, John.
Oh, I'm so bummed.
But we want to thank our listeners for coming back and share, like, review this podcast if it's inspiring you to think more broadly and have deeper conversations in your life. We appreciate you.
Thank you for joining us at Spirit Cafe, a place where you can safely explore your spirituality without the guilt or dogma of religion. Leave all comments and suggestions on the Spirit Cafe podcast Facebook page.